Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Easton Historical Society and Museum. I'm Jonathan Coe, one of the directors here. We've got I think, a nice event for you that we'll be talking to you about our favorite man of the day, Dr. George Badger Cogswell. And I've got a packet for everybody if you want it. So if anybody needs another packet, we do. Steve? So he's printing them up as we speak, getting more copies. We'll get them to you. But before we get going, I want you to hear from our president and Ken Michael. You, Ken.
Thank you, John. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ken Michael. I'm the president of the Easton Historical Society and Museum. And I'd like to welcome everybody today. First of all, I'd like to give credit to John for coming up with the idea of honoring Dr. George Badger Cogswell. A very, very accomplished and, in terms of the area, famous man. We have open houses themed every second or third Sunday of the month. And I hope everyone here today enjoys it. And I really want to thank you again for coming up. So on that, I'm going to let John start the program.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, John.
Okay, so we've got a lot of references, a lot of documents we've had to do a little research on. I actually got to know about the good doctor. I've seen his picture forever here. Everybody has too, and they go, who is that guy? Oh, that's Dr. Cogswell. Okay, what did he do? I don't know. So that was kind of before you really dig into it. And you do a quick study on him, and the more I dug in, I go, oh my goodness gracious. That's why they stopped schools that day during his funeral, the whole bit. But let me go through this. I'm gonna read, and I'm gonna pass off to Ken, and we'll go back and forth a little bit. But we'll have pictures in here. Talks about his house, where he grew up, his father, his really famous brother. So George Badger Cogswell, MD, son of Dr. George and Abigail Parker Cogswell, was born September 15th, 1834 in Bradford, Massachusetts. Anybody know where Bradford is?
Yes.
Where is it?
Been there. It's up by Amesbury.
Yes, it's actually parts of Haverhill now. That the town no longer exists, so it's Bradford. I had to look that up myself because I go, where's Bradford? Never heard of it. George Badger Cogswell was residing in Bradford. It's now Groveland, part of Haverhill, with his parents George Cogswell, a physician, his wife Elizabeth Cogswell, and his two sisters Abby P. and Sarah P. Cogswell, and his brother, we'll learn about him a little bit, William Cogswell, and two boarders, Rufus Sargent and a physician, and Nancy J. He fitted for college at the Gilmanton Academy and entered Dartmouth College in 1851. He did not complete the college course then. 1853 to 1855, he followed a sailor's life before the mast, going around the world. So did his brother. I don't know if they went on the same trip. His brother's 4 years younger, not sure, but went around, just wanted to be a sailor. He was there going around the world. After returning home, he attended lectures at Harvard Medical School. In 1857, received the degree of MD from Dartmouth Medical College in New Hampshire. He was a resident physician at the State Almshouse in Bridgewater, Massachusetts, from June 1857 to 59. Removed to North Easton in 1860. Boom, 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 the sounds of war are coming up. On February 18th, 1858, Dr. Cogswell married Catherine B. Brown, daughter of Addison and Catherine B. Griffin Brown. She was born August 13th, 1835 in West Newbury, Massachusetts. They have two children, Charles Hale and Kitty Badger. The former is noticed in this chapter. The latter married September 25th, 1883 to Charles W. Welch of Stoughton. And that'll be important because we've got some graves over there. That if you find a grave, you look at that, that's where you'll see the good doctor and some of his family members there. He fell ill with typhoid fever prior to moving to Easton from Bridgewater, Brockton at that time. In 1860, residing in Easton were George Badger, the physician, and his wife, Catherine B. Brown again, with his sons Charles Hale Cogswell, who actually went to Harvard and became a doctor himself, and a domestic worker, Margaret Powers. Following their marriage, on April 8, 1861, the U.S. appointments of U.S. postmasters noted George Badger Cogswell's appointment as the postmaster of the United States Postal Office in Northeastern Massachusetts. Now, at that time, the post office in the Northeastern was down right on Main Street here. The best I could say, it was 104 Main Street, no longer there. It's about where 108 Main Street is right now, the old Easton Pharmacy, right in that area. That's where he and his wife first had their house, and that was on 104 Main Street. So it was the first Northeastern post office. The post office later was moved to 54 Main Street. I've got a picture of that below. So that's still there. So we've got the post office there. It was down across the street from the grammar school. And it also shared with the Easton Library Association. He was the librarian at that time. So he's got a postmaster, he's a physician, he's a librarian. So this was about 20 years before the 1883 Oliver Ames Free Library. We have another one, I think. You've got, we need another one? A packet for anybody? Keep them coming. Make sure Mr. Williams gets a copy. Yeah, keep them printed. Keep them printed. Thanks, Steve. So this was the Easton Library Association, not the Ames Free Library. It was across the street. The building is still there. So on December 14th, 1861, he was mustered into service in the Civil War as an assistant surgeon of the 29th Regiment of the Massachusetts Volunteers and promoted surgeon on August 7th, 1862. He was for a time on the staff of General Wilcox as acting medical inspector of the 9th Army Corps. Now, just for anybody that's in this building a lot, we have a nice book supply back here of all the Massachusetts veterans that were in the Civil War. And it's by regiment. So if you happen to know the regiment and everything, it's right there. At the time of the 7 days fighting on the peninsula in 1862, when the federal forces retired, he remained behind and voluntarily yielded himself as a prisoner in order that he might care for his wounded comrades. And for 3 weeks he was confined to Libby Prison. We have a picture of Libby Prison in the packet that you have in front of you also, near the back. More to come on this. So this was by the first Manassas campaign, and so you can imagine they're all fighting down, and the Confederates are taking over. They are winning. So the North had to retreat. So you have a lot of veterans, a lot of soldiers down there in the field. He just stayed back, and he said, "I got to stay with them." By the way, the 29th Regiment had 7 Easton soldiers in that regiment. He knew of them. Okay, so he stayed back. He got himself captured. Unbelievable. During the siege of Knoxville, Tennessee, in 1864, owing to terrible hardships undergone, he contracted a severe illness and was discharged with disabilities March 15th, 1864. Now, I'm going to have some, we've got some testimonies here from a couple generals at the same time coming up, which Ken's going to talk about. I'm going to do the next one. But more detailed about his time being a prisoner, getting himself captured. So on the next page, this is in one of the books. The references we have are from the Memorial book, which is a great, it's unbelievable book. This is a glimpse of Army experience from General Joseph H. Barnes. And this is at the funeral, basically. Dear Madame, I thank you for the opportunity afforded me to offer my tribute of respect to the memory of your husband, my dear friend and fellow soldier, Dr. George B. Cogswell. We were closely associated in the Army. During his entire service as an assistant surgeon and surgeon of the 29th, I was lieutenant colonel of his regiment, and much of the time in command, and so have a full personal knowledge of his military record. He was a faithful, energetic, and skillful surgeon, a good soldier, genial, sympathetic companion, and he was greatly beloved by the officers and men in his regiment. In the Peninsula Campaign during the 7 days battle, unmindful of self, he voluntarily remained on the battlefield after our troops had withdrawn to attend to our wounded who were left on the field. And being thus engaged, was taken prisoner, as we just heard. While in the enemy's lines at Richmond, he was active and constant in looking after the sick and wounded among the federal prisoners. In his unremitting efforts in their behalf were warmly appreciated by many suffering comrades. His admirable qualities as a surgeon were duly recognized by his superior officers in that branch of the service, and he was often assigned to duty in charge of hospitals as a medical director, serving always with fidelity and zeal. The surviving members of the old 29th Regiment mourn the loss of a true and loving comrade. With deepest sympathy, I remain very truly yours, Joseph H. Barnes. This next one Ken will read from William H. Osborne.
Thanks, John. Thanks, John. Before I start to read these letters, I want to make a couple of comments. One is, John mentioned Libby Prison, where Dr. Cogswell was incarcerated. Libby Prison was second only to Andersonville Prison in the Civil War. And Andersonville was the heights of cruelty and mistreatment to federal prisoners of war. It was a Confederate prison, and Libby was second only to Andersonville. So when you're thinking about the conditions into which Dr. Cogswell voluntarily put himself, consider that. The other thing is that within the context of these letters to his wife when he passed away, it gives you a sense of how his peers thought about Dr. Cogswell. I mean, we all think well of ourselves, but the real question is, as the Scottish poet Robert Burns once said, "Oh, the gift he gives to see ourselves as others see us." Well, this is a good example of how people, his peers, thought about Dr. Cogswell. And I'm going to read a letter from William H. Osborne, who was the historian of the 29th Massachusetts Regiment. To Mrs. George B. Cogswell, dear Madam, it gives me great pleasure to tell you that my acquaintance with your late husband, both during and since the war, was of the most pleasant nature and resulted in the highest respect for him. One of his most marked characteristics was his great kindness of heart and his unfailing sympathy for those in distress and trouble. During the retreat of the Army of the Potomac from its lines in front of Richmond in June and July 1862, he voluntarily remained on one of the battlefields after the close of the battle for the sole purpose of administering professionally to the sick and wounded of his regiment, the 29th Massachusetts. And as a result of this action, he fell into the hands of the enemy. To put that in a little bit of perspective, it was not unusual after a battle to have the wounded from the opposite side shot and killed and not taken prisoner. I have to imagine that in many cases, Dr. Cogswell was preventing people, obviously the Confederate Army, from shooting wounded on the battlefield. Excuse me. And he was allowed unusual privileges while in this situation, and he availed himself of the opportunities thus afforded to search out the wounded of his regiment among the various prison camps and to aid them in every manner possible. I was one of that unfortunate number, and on the 14th of July at Savage's Station, he found me and administered to my wants in a manner and at a time that doubtless enabled me to pass through successfully the experiences of hardship and suffering that were in store for me. I assume he's talking about his incarceration at the Libby prison. Late in the afternoon of the 18th of July, when I was about to be placed on board our flag of truce boat, the Louisiana, at Aitken's Landing on the James River, where I had suffered an almost complete physical collapse, he was present, almost providentially, to aid me again. As I lay on a stretcher near the head of the steamboat wharf with barely sufficient consciousness left to know what was passing and unable to speak audibly, I was suddenly startled by hearing his pleasant voice calling my name. He was unremitting in his attentions to me during the balance of the night, and as I believe, saved my life. For these acts of great kindness and true soldierly fraternity, I ever afterwards entertained towards him feelings of extreme gratitude and love. From H.A. Levitt, Northeastern Massachusetts, to Mrs. Cogswell. Dear Madam, I'm grateful for the privilege of paying my humble tribute to your husband, to whose kindness and thoughtfulness I owe my life. I think it was on June 27, 1862, that I was taken prisoner at Savage's Station, together with about 2,200 others that had been carried to the rear. Everyone who was not able to walk was captured. About July 1st, we were carried to Richmond, and a few weeks after Dr. Cogswell came to Libby, meaning Libby Prison, and found Sergeant W.A. Keyser and myself of our regiment. As he had charge of a hospital some distance from us, he told us he would take us to his place where he could take care of us. He never came to see us without bringing us something nice to eat that had been overlooked on our regular bill of fare. Prisoners were not fed a whole lot in those prisons, Libby, Andersonville, etc., at the time. Some weeks later, when the doctor came, he said, "Come, I'm going to take you away with me." As neither of us could stand alone, and as we were on the top floor, the doctor took one on each arm and got us down the stairs, none of the guard objecting until we reached the outer door. There, two sentinels with crossed bayonets refused to let us out and called the lieutenant of the guard, who happened to be an almost beardless boy. The doctor and lieutenant had a very long and very animated discussion. My guess is the doctor was giving this beardless boy what for and telling him to get the hell out of the way. In which the doctor insisted that his orders were from the Surgeon General, etc. Finally, the lieutenant said, "Well, you can go this time, but not another," and I'll interpose here, "damned man will go out without a written order." Damned may have been an understatement. We were then led, half carried, to a street below where miles of ambulances were passing up one side empty and returning on the other side filled with the prisoners taken. I think at the first Bull Run and Harper's Ferry, both of which were victories for the Confederate Army in the Civil War. When the doctor found a young boy driver, he sternly ordered him to get out and help us in, then to turn his ambulance around and drive forwards to the line. Thus, in a short time, we found ourselves mixed up with the others. "Where are we going?" I found the strength to ask. "Home, if the good Lord favors you," our brave friend replied, the doctor. Here he disappeared, as of course it was very essential for the doctor's health not to be found in the company of escaped prisoners. So all of this is describing actually an escape of prisoners, not an actual transfer. Driving slowly some miles below Richmond, we heard cheering at the head of the line, and arriving at the top of a hill, we could see the old flag waving above the trees on the steamer that was to take us to Baltimore and home. At the steamer's side, our good doctor again appeared and cared for us as far as Harrison's Landing, where he joined the regiment, and we proceeded on to Baltimore. The good doctor must have been pretty fast, because he was getting around throughout this whole line of wagons and boats, etc. I'm positive that without the help of Dr. Cogswell, I would never have seen the outside of Liberty Prison, as after spending several weeks in the hospital in Baltimore and having the very best of care, I weighed less than 80 pounds. On this note, as we used to pass the ball back and forth to one another in basketball games, I'm going to pass it over to Kevin.
Yeah, good. There is one part of research with Dr. Cogswell. The Cogswell boys, they talked about all the Cogswell boys, his father, brothers, and they all were, every one of them over 6'2". And I think back in the day, that's pretty tall. They made mention of that too. So the good doctor, he was ill, was discharged. We'll take it after when he was in Easton, and he went to the Civil War. Then he got discharged in '62. He's back in Easton sometime after the discharge. Now, the 1871 map of North Easton Village shows the parcel at 104 Main Street, as noted with Dr. G. or D.G.B. Cogswell. That was, again, that house right next to where Easton Pharmacy was, where the fitness center is right now. It would have been off to the left, no longer there. So he's there. In 1871 map, North Easton Village shows the parcel at 115 Main Street, as noted with the name J.W. Beatley. He owned that residence, and that's where the grammar school would be, okay? That's where the building of Oakhurst was. That was his building. In 1870, 150 Main was Joseph Beatley's, was working as an agent selling fire bricks. Joseph's real property was valued at $8,000. In 1870, Joseph Beatley owned a 2 3/4 acre parcel with $1,000 and a house and $4,000. So now you can see the next page. That is Oakhurst. That is where the Beatty Mansion was, and the Cogswells moved in. That is an unbelievable, beautiful building with a stable in the back. And I had to look at this again because it exited to Main Street, down the hill. So today there was like a brick wall there, so that must have been very, very flat back then. So you can see the horses and everything. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous building. So he's there now at Oakhurst, and it does show in the map where now he's across the street, right there. Dr. Cogswell was the personal physician to Frederick Lothrop Ames and many of the Ameses. The 1895 map in the North Easton Village shows the parcel there, again with his name on it. And then you see on the next page, you can see how Oakhurst is looking. It's actually the front door is actually facing west. Okay, so that's Oakhurst. On the next page, on March 6, 1896, George Badger Cogswell passed away in Stoughton at the age of 61, with his burial in Stoughton. And again, it's the cemetery not far from Town Spa across the 138. That's where the Cogswells and the Welches and some of the kids are buried. On June 8th, 1898, 2 years later, his wife had passed away at the age of 61. Her burial's in Stoughton, the same place. In 1896, their house, dwelling property at 115 Main Street, was moved towards the, well, I think that's wrong when I'm reading this now. It was actually moved east. This was Oakhurst, was moved east. They got rid of the stable. So that building right now is still there. You can see it today. What they did, the front, you're looking on the picture on the top left. That is looking straight down at Main Street. That was looking east before, when it was Oakhurst. So they turned it, moved it for the North Easton Grammar School in 1916. So what you see down there today is the grammar school, which is now apartments, up in the hill, and Oakhurst is up back. And so that is still there. That's a picture, a couple different pictures of it. Okay. All right. Kenneth?
Yes, sir.
This is from Dr. Puffer from
Thanks,
Brockton
Joe.
Enterprise.
And these are, as you can see, they're personal tributes. So these are not his military, but rather his friends, neighbors, and again, his peers in civilian life. Dr. Cogswell was a resident here in North Bridgewater for a short time, in or about 1860. At that time, he was in doubt where to locate, but finally decided through the earnest persuasions of the Honorable Oliver Ames, Jr., to go to North Easton. He made many friends here during his short stay of a few months, and he has always had their friendship and respect since. He early became, and since has been, the physician of the Ames family. So as John said, he administered medical treatment to a lot of the members of the Ames family at that time. With all the honor, confidence, affection, and respect that such a position implies, the doctor was an independent man, outspoken and frank, and yet not unkindly, but genial in his intercourse with the world. He came of a family of physicians. He had, as few have had, the old-fashioned country practice, and yet was in intimate touch with modern, up-to-date scientific methods. In politics, he was a stalwart Republican and never claimed to know it all. No man in professional life can again quite fill the position he occupied. The great men in Easton, with whom he was associated in a long professional and business life, have, many of them, joined the great majority. I think he means they died. Dr. Cogswell was a skillful physician, a good neighbor, and a steadfast friend. The people of Easton will miss Dr. Cogswell for a great many years and remember him always with affection and respect. Here we are in 2024, remembering him once again. Notwithstanding the demand with which his professional labors made upon his time, he was actively interested in matters of the public weal and was chosen to fill many important posts of honor and trust. He was postmaster at Northeastern from 1861 to 1885, had been a member of the Board of Water Commissioners, had served as road commissioner, and was a member of the Board of Health at the time of his decease. He was the librarian of the Northeastern Library Association during the 11 years of its existence, from 1869 to 1880. He was mainly instrumental in establishing Paul Dean Lodge, the Fraternal Order of Masons, was a charter member and its first master. He was also a charter member of the A. B. Randall Post 52 GAR, Grand Army of the Republic, Easton Lodge, K of H, and Northeastern Council RA. I don't know what K of H or RA means. John?
Yeah, that's the Knights of Honor.
Knights of Honor.
It was an organization for insurance purposes. So that was in the Northeastern. They kind of had their meetings in the top of the Spooner building when I was here, right on center and corner center and Main there. Okay, and now some more tributes, a few more here. This is personal tributes, Dr. Cogswell and the children. The children were warm admirers, children of Easton, of Dr. Cogswell, where he loved the children. He took care to show the little ones how much he thought of them, and they, in their turn, were observant and appreciative of his kindness. His interest was in the children of the rich and poor alike, attracting them all by his strong and genial personality. It was fitting, therefore, while his body was lying in state, during the funeral services, that the school flag should be placed at half-mast and that the schools in the village should be closed in memory of the beloved physician. During a portion of the last session before his burial, the teachers spoke to their pupils upon his life and character. They dwelt especially upon his record as a brave soldier in the Union Army. His practical sympathy, his generous self-sacrifice for good of others, his faithful discharge of the full measure of the duty and trial in every relation of life. They placed before the children the high example of his character, conveying the lesson that in the development of a true manhood there is no shirking, notwithstanding the demand which his professional labors made upon his time. He was actively interested in matters of public weal, but was chosen to fill many important posts. I think you read that. Sorry, I'm on the next page here.
No avoidance?
Page 30.
No avoidance, no evasion.
no avoidance, no evasion of any burden or responsibility. As the teachers and the scholars looked for the last time upon the face of their departed friend, a contemplation of his life, so filled with sweet offices of charity, brought to mind the sentiment of Webster, not what others do for us, but what we do for others makes immortality. Okay, I think you're up.
These are unidentified extracts from different letters of sympathy that were written to his wife and family. Excuse me. It would be a comfort to you if you could hear the kindnesses of his that are being talked about this week. Many of the poor are going from house to house, telling of the times he has refused pay from them, and of the times he has come to them in unseasonable weather and at all hours, and that if he if he only had all that belonged to him, what a rich man he would be. He has long been a very dear friend to me, and no one out of your own family will miss him more than I will. I've never forgotten how good he was to me through 2 long illnesses, and how he was always more as a loving friend than merely as a physician. Excuse me. This care and kindness endeared him to me so strongly that I can never forget it. I regret exceedingly that I have not been able to do more to show him how much I appreciated what he did for me. This is the 3rd letter. I have never forgotten the hours of devotion your husband gave to mine. I believe this was written by somebody's wife. His loss will be felt by our whole town and other towns, and I shall suffer greatly in not having him by my own fireside day after day, as when my own family was whole and the circle not broken. He was a dear friend to us all. John?
Dr. S.K. Tao, a surgeon of high standings in the surgical department of the War of the Rebellion, said to me last fall that Dr. George B. Cogswell ranked as high and was much valued in the surgical department of the war as was his brother, General William Cogswell, in the field department of said war. So, we've gone through all the tributes. What a great man. Unbelievable. You know, let's raise a glass to Dr. Cogswell. You know, here, here. Here, here. What a man. By the way, this picture, I know you can't read the plaque. That was probably hanging in the lodge, the Paul Dean Lodge, because it's got a plaque. It's from the lodge itself, the Masonic Lodge. Probably went from there to the top of the Oaks Ames, where the first Masonic Lodge was, to down on William Street.
William Street.
Yeah.
And Jenny Lynn.
And that was the lodge at one time. It was after the Lutheran Church went to Lincoln Street. I think. So the last thing I want to share with you, this is Libby Prison, this next, and by the way, this is a picture of William Cogswell. Some say the more important brother. I'm not sure about that. Everything I've read about the good doctor, he's the man. So Libby Prison, in the banks of the James River, it was a former tobacco building. They needed a big building. So I'm not going to read you the whole thing. You can read that in the back about his credentials. But let me give you a couple pieces here. So again, born in Bradford. He came back. When he came back from the trip around the world, he entered Harvard Law School. So remember, the father was a physician, George was a physician, his brother William went into law, so at Harvard. So one went to medical school, one went to law school, pretty bright folks there. He served as a private. He started the Civil War as a private. And he went in, and he had a number of increases in his rank, brevet increases for gallantry. You can list all these battles right down here he's been through, but he ended up being You can find it here. I think it was a brigadier general.
He was Brigadier General.
Brigadier General brevet. So just reading one thing here about his time in Salem. I think it's right here. I'm trying to see if it's still up here. I guess I don't have it. But he was the mayor of Salem. He lived in Salem. He had terms as a state rep, state senator, and he went off to the U.S. He was a U.S. congressman as well. He ended up as a congressman in the House of Representatives. But just an amazing, amazing, amazing man. So, thank you for listening to me and bearing with Ken.
It is a pretty tough bear, trust me.
But I hope you enjoyed kind of a real deep down dive on the doctor. But I can only imagine back then what they thought of him in town. You know, he would not pay. He would rip up bills. He went out and they did a lot of house visits. Not like today, you have to go to the office. But he knew who could not pay, and he would not bill them. I just found that just unbelievable. So, but thank you very much for listening. So listen, last thing I'd like to say, again, thank you for coming today. If you're not a member, love you to become a member. The money is right. It's not much. We would love to have you be with us all our open houses. We have them every month. But we have forms you can get online. So please join us. Your donations really help us produce a lot of the great displays that you see and keep this building open. So Ken, last time for you.
Well, I'm not going to repeat what John just said, except that I'm 100% behind what he just said. And say thank you to all of you for coming today. Hope you enjoyed our program. And I realize it was tough bearing with me, but John was the antidote.
Yeah.
All right, give your